When it first aired on television in 1990, it wasn't just scary, it scarred an entire generation. A clown on network TV shouldn't have been this horrifying, but Pennywise broke every rule of family-friendly horror. The cast, the chaos, and the cursed stories behind it, even stranger than the movie itself. And you won't believe what scene left the crew terrified long after cameras stopped rolling. Here are 20 bizarre hidden facts about it you completely missed. Before the clown, before the terror, there was just a question. Stephen King sat at his desk in Maine and asked himself what scared children most. Not monsters under the bed, not ghosts in attics. Something worse, something that hides in daylight. He thought about clowns, those painted smiles that never quite reach the eyes. He thought about fairy tales, shapeshifters that lure kids into dark woods with candy and promises. He combined his own lifelong fear of clowns with the ancient legends of beings that preyed on innocence by disguising themselves. King said later he imagined a creature that wasn't a clown at all, just something pretending to be one. And that's what made Pennywise different. He wasn't scary because he looked monstrous. He was scary because he looked harmless. A predator hiding in plain sight. Because Pennywise wasn't inspired by funhouses or circus tents. He was born from humanity's oldest fear, the thing that smiles while it hunts. Tim Curry made a choice before filming even started. Pennywise would rarely blink, not never, just rarely. He practiced it, trained his eyes to stay open longer than felt natural, longer than felt human. On set, it unnerved everyone. Actors, crew, even the director would glance away first, because when Pennywise stared, he didn't just look at you, he studied you, like a predator measuring prey. No CGI, no contacts, no tricks, just Curry holding his gaze until the air between him and the camera felt wrong. And in every scene where Pennywise appears, that unblinking stare crawls under your skin. The smallest movement missing created the biggest fear, because something that doesn't blink isn't watching, it's hunting. Splitting it into two 90-minute episodes was a risk no one had tried before. Horror didn't work like this on network TV. You gave audiences a tight 2-hour movie, scared them, sent them home. You didn't drag it out over 2 nights, didn't build slow dread across 3 hours of runtime. The network hesitated. Would viewers come back for night 2? Would the momentum collapse? Would censors gut the whole thing before it aired? But director Tommy Lee Wallace pushed. He needed time to let the Losers Club breathe, to show childhood and adulthood in parallel, to let the horror build slow and heavy. ABC greenlit it, and when it premiered, it became one of the most watched TV events of the decade. Over 30 million viewers tuned in. What started as a gamble became a genre blueprint, and horror on television was never the same. The sewer scenes weren't filmed in sewers. They were built inside a massive warehouse. Every pipe and puddle and shadow constructed by hand. And the water pooling at the actors' feet, ice cold. Production wanted authentic steam rising off the surface, and wanted that damp chill visible on camera, so they kept the water near freezing. The child actors waded through it take after take, shivering between shots, teeth chattering. Tim Curry refused. He wouldn't step into that water. His stunt double took the plunge instead, wore the costume, stood in the freezing puddles while Curry stayed dry and warm off camera. The kids noticed. They didn't complain, but they noticed. The clown stayed dry while everyone else froze. Because while Pennywise terrorized them on screen, he stayed comfortable behind the scenes. It started as a joke. One crew member left a red balloon in an actor's trailer. A gag, a nod to the film, harmless. But then it spread. More balloons appeared. In hotel bathrooms, tied to doorknobs, floating in hallways. The cast couldn't escape them. Some laughed it off. Others didn't. One actor admitted years later that he started sleeping with the lights on, half expecting a balloon to drift into his room at night. The crew turned Pennywise's calling card into an on-set curse, and the jokes stopped being funny. Because when you spend weeks filming a horror story, when you live inside that fear every day, the line between fiction and reality blurs, and a red balloon stops being a prop. It becomes a warning. Beverly's bathroom scene became iconic. Blood erupts from the sink, sprays across mirrors, floods the floor, but the red dye mixture used for that scene contained chemicals that irritated skin on contact. The actress playing Beverly broke out in painful hives after filming. Her arms, her neck, anywhere the fake blood touched turned red and raw. Production halted for a day while medics treated her, while the prop team scrambled to find a safer alternative. They eventually did, but the damage was done. The scene that terrified audiences also hurt the person at its center. Even fake blood can bite back, and in it nothing came easy, not even the illusions. The giant spider legs that appear in the finale, those jerky, unnatural limbs crawling through the sewers, weren't built for it. They were borrowed, repurposed from another ABC sci-fi project, spray painted black, covered in goo and grime, and thrust into service as the physical form of an ancient evil. Budget constraints forced creativity. The crew took what they had and made made it work. The spider wasn't elegant, it was clunky, awkward, visibly fake if you looked close enough. But in the chaos of the climax, surrounded by fog and darkness and screaming actors, it sold the terror anyway. The climax was literally recycled horror, and somehow it still worked. Stephen King wanted a walk-on cameo, just a brief appearance, a Derry resident passing through a scene, a wink to fans who knew his face. But he was too busy, filming another project, buried in deadlines, pulled in a dozen directions. So instead of showing up on set, he sent the crew a handwritten note. "Tell Pennywise I'll see him in my dreams." The crew posted it on the production board. It stayed there through the entire shoot, a reminder that even the creator wasn't immune to the terror he'd unleashed. And even King, the man who invented Pennywise, who wrote every word of it, joked about keeping his distance. Because some nightmares you create, some you just survive. The cast stayed in a budget hotel near the filming location. Nothing fancy, just beds and bathrooms and bad coffee. The hotel doubled as the crew's base, a place to collapse after 14-hour shooting days. But strange things started happening. Lights flickered in empty hallways. Doors slammed shut with no wind, no draft, no explanation. One actor swore he heard laughter echoing from the vents late at night, faint and childlike, drifting through the walls. Another woke to find his room freezing cold. The thermostat cranked down, though he'd set it warm before bed. The crew started calling it the hotel from hell. Some blamed old wiring, faulty HVAC, the power of suggestion after filming horror all day. But others weren't so sure. Off camera, the nightmare followed them home, and it stopped being just a story. Pennywise's eyes didn't just stare, they wandered. Tim Curry trained himself to look in two different directions at once, a trick of muscle control and focus that most people can't do. No CGI, no contact lenses, no optical effects, just Curry manipulating his gaze until his eyes drifted independently. It unsettled everyone so badly that Wallace used it sparingly. Too much, and audiences would laugh. Too little, and the effect was wasted. Curry practiced the technique for weeks before filming, staring at himself in mirrors until he could control each eye independently without thinking. He said it gave him headaches that lasted for hours. But in the moments where Pennywise's eyes split, where one iris tracked left and the other tracked right, the screen felt wrong, broken, inhuman. Even Pennywise's stare was a practical effect, and it worked because it shouldn't have been possible. Between takes, the child actors playing the Losers Club sat together in a corner of the warehouse set. They weren't rehearsing lines, they were sharing fears, real ones, spiders, drowning, death, abandonment. Director Tommy Lee Wallace encouraged it. He wanted them to bond, to feel like a real group of misfits banding together against something bigger than themselves. And it worked. The kids opened up, cried, laughed, held each other through moments of genuine vulnerability. Wallace filmed one of these sessions without their knowledge, just raw footage of scared kids being honest. He never used it in the final cut, but he kept it. And later, he said it shaped how he directed their scenes. The kids weren't just playing scared, they were healing through horror, because sometimes the best performances come from the places that hurt most. Stephen King's universe connects through symbols, threads that run between books and stories, and it hides one of the biggest. In the sewer water, floating among debris and rot, sits a small toy turtle, easy to miss, easy to dismiss as set dressing. But fans of King's work know better. That turtle is Maturin, the cosmic entity from the Dark Tower series, the ancient being that vomited up the universe and exists outside time. It's the true enemy. The miniseries never explains it, never draws attention to it, just plants the symbol and moves on. But for those who know, that one prop ties it to a mythology far bigger than Derry, far older than Pennywise. Even in a made-for-TV movie, King's universe was already expanding, and the Easter egg floated by unnoticed. Those dripping sewer tunnels weren't real. They were constructed inside a massive warehouse, lined with fog machines and leaking pipes, every shadow and puddle built by hand. The crew worked fast, cutting corners to meet deadlines, and one section of flooring wasn't secured properly. During filming, a crew member stepped onto what looked like solid ground and nearly fell through. The false floor gave way, dropping him waist deep into the scaffolding below. He caught himself, pulled himself up, walked it off. But if he'd fallen differently, if the angle had been worse, he could have broken bones, cracked his skull, and died. Production paused for an hour while they reinforced the set, and then they kept filming. The set itself was a safety hazard, because the nightmare on screen was dangerous enough. The warehouse didn't need to be. ABC wanted it to be scary, but not too scary. No gore, no screams that lasted too long, no trauma that lingered. Standards and practices sent pages of notes. Cut this line, soften that death, remove the blood. Wallace read them, nodded, and ignored half. He filmed the scene scenes is written, knowing some would get trimmed in editing, but hoping enough would survive. When the rough cut came in, the network panicked. Too violent, too disturbing, too intense for family television. But test audiences loved it. Ratings projections soared. So the same executives who demanded cuts suddenly called it bold, groundbreaking, a masterpiece of television horror. Censorship accidentally helped create one of TV's scariest moments, because what survived the red pen felt even more dangerous, and the nightmare slipped through. One cameraman quit mid-shoot, claiming he couldn't look at that clown another day. He'd started dreaming of Curry's face every night, hearing the laugh in his sleep, waking up in cold sweats with the image of that white face and red smile burned into his mind. When producers begged him to return, offering more money, shorter hours, anything to get him back, he refused. He packed his equipment, left the warehouse, and never worked on another film set again. He switched careers entirely, took a job in accounting, as far from cameras and costumes and clowns as he could get. Pennywise didn't just haunt the characters, he drove a crew member out of film forever. Pennywise's laugh wasn't human. Tim Curry layered it with guttural breathing techniques borrowed from vocal coaches, sounds pulled from deep in his throat and chest. Then sound editors added low-frequency reverb, sub-bass tones that hit below conscious hearing. Your ears don't fully register them, but your body does. Your chest tightens, your heart rate spikes. You feel wrong without knowing why. Test audiences reported feeling physically ill during Pennywise's scenes, complaining of nausea and anxiety they couldn't explain. The sound engineers had weaponized audio itself. That laugh wasn't just scary to hear, it was physically unsettling. Your body reacts to that laugh before your brain does, because Pennywise's voice became a weapon. Originally, its final form wasn't just a puppet spider. There was supposed to be a full transformation sequence, Pennywise shedding his clown skin, morphing into something ancient and alien, a creature beyond comprehension. The effects team designed it, built the mid-form prosthetics, and planned the shoot. Then budget cuts hit, the studio slashed funding, and the transformation scene was scrapped. What aired was a jump cut, clown to spider, no in between. The discarded prosthetics supposedly still exist somewhere in a studio storage facility, a nightmare that never got to see the light. Crew members who worked on the pieces said they were the most disturbing things they'd ever built. Fans were confused for decades, wondering why the transition felt so abrupt, why Pennywise's true form looked so cheap. The most feared part of it never made it to air, and the nightmare we got was just a shadow of what almost existed. To capture genuine fear, Wallace made a rule. The child actors weren't allowed to see Tim Curry in full costume until their first scene together. They rehearsed with him out of makeup, heard his voice, learned their blocking, but they never saw Pennywise. Then came the sewer confrontation. Cameras rolled, Curry stepped into frame, white face, red smile, eyes that didn't blink, and the kids froze. Their reactions, the trembling, the wide eyes, the way they instinctively stepped back, none of it was acting. It was real fear captured on film. One child actor later said he couldn't look Curry in the eye for days afterward, even out of costume. The performance haunted him in ways the script never could. Their terror wasn't acting, it was a survival instinct. Tommy Lee Wallace had a secret. He hated clowns, genuinely feared them. Childhood trauma, irrational phobia, the kind of dread that doesn't fade with age. And yet he agreed to direct it, a film centered entirely on the most terrifying clown ever conceived. During filming, he had nightmares. Pennywise followed him into sleep, grinned at him from dark corners of his subconscious. Between takes, Wallace would walk off set just to avoid looking at Curry in costume. He'd stand outside, breathe, collect himself, then return. The man who brought Pennywise to life couldn't stand to face him, and maybe that's why it worked, because the fear behind the camera bled into every frame. Tim Curry refused makeup tests. Most actors sit through multiple fittings, test different looks, let designers refine the vision. Curry skipped all of it. He was so confident in his version of Pennywise that he believed overexposure would kill the fear factor. If he saw the clown too many times before filming, the magic would vanish. So the first time the full costume and makeup came together was on the day cameras rolled. The makeup team finished. Curry stood. I looked in the mirror, and even they stepped back. They'd created something they couldn't fully control. When Curry walked onto set for the first time, the crew didn't just react, they jumped, physically recoiled. The makeup team was terrified of their own creation, and Curry knew he'd won. During the sewer shoots, the mix of fog fluid, stagnant water, and old food used for grime created a nauseating stench that hung in the air like a physical presence. The warehouse had poor ventilation, and as temperatures rose under the hot lights, the smell intensified. Crew members started getting headaches first, then nausea, then full-blown sickness. Between takes, people rushed outside to vomit, gulping fresh air like drowning swimmers breaking the surface. And through it all, Tim Curry stayed in full Pennywise costume, standing in the middle of that toxic soup, completely unfazed. Pennywise didn't need poison gas. The set was already toxic. It wasn't just a TV movie. It was a psychological experiment wrapped in latex and laughter. Its legacy crawled through generations, from the VHS nightmares of the 90s to the billion-dollar remakes today. Tim Curry's performance burned itself into collective memory, a grease paint nightmare that refused to fade. And now it lives on, in remakes, in memes, in the phobias of adults who were once children who made the mistake of watching, a TV miniseries that became a legend, a clown that became a demon, a story that never really ended. So which of these facts creeped you out most? And what classic horror should we dig into next? Because some nightmares don't fade when you wake up. They just wait. Float with the rest of us. The water's fine down here.